Welcome everybody. As it says on the screen, we're here to tell you how to succeed in the SQE, specifically with us at the College of Legal Practice. So there's just a few housekeeping things that we want to cover, first of all, before we crack on. So just to let you all know, this session is being recorded and we will be sending this over, the recording over, along with the slides to all of the attendees by the end of the week. So keep an eye out for that. I just want to draw your attention to the fact that closed caption is available. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a button that says CC, and that's how you turn those on if you want those up. Now, as we go along, hopefully throughout the webinar, we are going to be answering the questions that you've asked previously. But if you have any other ones, then pop them in the chat box and either myself will respond to them in the chat box or we will get around to them as we go through the slides as well. And lastly, please get your phones ready because we have some interactive activities for you, and there are also some QR codes that you can scan for some important information as well. Okay. So what we're going to go do now is we're just going to give some introductions. So I'm Sydney. I'm the Student Recruitment Officer at the College of Legal Practice. If you give us a call or you book in a one-to-one or send an email in initially, I'm usually the first point of contact that will respond to those alongside my lovely manager, Jolie, who's the Student Recruitment Manager. I'll be passing over to her shortly and she'll take over. But moving on, we've also got the lovely Jane Waddle here, who's the head of curriculum. And we are very, very lucky to be joined by one of our LLM students, Mary, as well. So we're the ones that are going to be talking you through this webinar today. So this is what we'll be covering. We're going to touch on who we are, the SQE route, the assessments, a revision checklist for the SQE, some tips in preparing for the SQE, and we will also be having a Q&A session as well. Okay, so for those that don't know, we are a postgraduate course provider that specialises in SQE preparation courses, and we offer flexible online learning options at a cheaper cost that fit around your schedule. And just to give you a bit of extra background, our parent company are actually the College of Law in Australia, and they are the leaders in legal education in Australia as well. So we do have over 20 years of digital learning expertise. So as you can see, we are all about accessible and affordable legal education. So this is at the core of our ethos. So traditionally, as I'm sure you're aware, the legal profession is known for being one with many barriers and challenges. So we do our bit to try and eliminate those by offering courses at a more affordable price. We also like to facilitate access through our personal and targeted individual support, where students get access to high levels of one-to-one tutor supervision. And lastly, we ensure we facilitate an inclusive learning environment as well through our learning and teaching. So we can make reasonable adjustment for those that need it, giving everyone the opportunity to get the most out of their learning too. So moving on to the next slide, here's just an example to give you an idea of some of the firms that we work with and also some educational providers as well. Now, this is where I'm going to leave you and hand you over to Jolie. But as I say, any questions that you've got, pop them in the chat and you'll likely see my name popping up responding to them if someone else doesn't cover them. Okay.
Thank you very much, Sydney. So next, we're just gonna have our first interactive activity. So make sure that you have your phone ready with you. So just really wanted to have a tiny little active poll and just wanted to see what kind of words actually come to your mind when you hear SQE. You can see a QR code on the screen here, so feel free to scan the QR code and you can enter your answer. It can be anything, what you think about the SQE, what is the first word that come to your mind when you see, okay, SQE. Feel free to scan the QR code and enter your answer. Okay. I hope it is working. Okay, that's great. I can see the first answer, advocacy. Any other answer? Okay, I can see that people are actually typing. That's really handy. Oh, okay. Intense, very challenging, very expensive. Okay, that's really interesting to see that. Any more? That's a change, of course, from the LPC to the SQE route. That's quite a big change as well. Any others? All right. Scary. Okay. I have actually spoken to quite a few people, and they do find it quite demanding or scary. There's quite a lot of uncertainty from their point of view. So hopefully, after today's webinar, you will get a better understanding about the SQE route, and you will have more confidence, and you are more comfortable in trying to when you are preparing for the SQE, and hopefully when you are taking the SQE exam as well. So what I'm going to do next is I will pass it to Jane, and she will be talking a little bit more about the SQE route, and also there will be some examples of MCQ questions that we will be showing you guys as well. So over to you, Jane.
Lovely, thanks very much, Julie, and good to see a very positive comment on Slido. Tamara, you said it's interesting job afterwards, and I couldn't agree more. I think law is a fantastic career. There's so many options open and so many possibilities, and whether it's in-house or just lots. We can talk more about that later. So what does the SQE route look like? Well, it's much more flexible than the old route. And this little diagram on your screens, you'll see this is one the SRA use. So the bookends here are the two blue puzzles. So the degree or equivalent. So you have to start with that. And most of you, I think it will be a degree. Doesn't have to be a law degree. But we recommend, if you don't have a law degree, that you do a graduate conversion course, because SQE is quite hard. It's quite demanding. And I think you're already, judging by the responses we've had, I think you're all very aware of that. So you start with the degree, and the end bit, the exit bit's the other blue jigsaw puzzle there, which is you need to meet the suitability requirements on character and suitability before you can enroll as a solicitor. The other two parts, the purple and the green bits, are interchangeable. So, and this is where it's different from the old route. Before, you used to have to finish all your academic studies, and only then could you go out and train and learn the skills under a training contract. That's changed now. So you can actually have qualifying work experience before you embark on attempting SQE1 and SQE2. So that's where it's fundamentally different. You could also have qualifying work experience interspersed amongst your studies. And I know from the questions some of you have already posted that that's some of you are already there, that you've perhaps been paralegaling, whatever. So you could do some qualifying work experience before, you could do some while you're studying, or you could save it all up and do it at the end. But it's just much, much more flexible. One of the things it's addressing is that bottleneck where students used to do the LPC, incur huge amounts of cost, and then struggle to get a training contract. And of course, without that contract, you couldn't qualify. So qualifying work experience is probably the biggest change here. We'll talk more about it in a moment. So if I could have the next slide, Jolie, we'll just go on to SQE1. So I think this is the big ask with SQE1 because it's all about knowledge. You have to cover functioning legal knowledge in 13 different practice areas. Have a look on the SRA's website if you want to see more details about it, but they're all the subjects you'd expect: litigation, property, business, conduct, ethics, and so on. So there's no surprises. It's examined solely by MCQs. And they're not just any old MCQs, there's 360 of them, and they have 5 options, not 4. And every option is its single best answer. Now, what that means is that quite often all 5 options are correct and plausible, but one is better. So that reflects life and practice as a solicitor, where there are lots of options, but you've always got to choose the best one for the client. So that's demanding. What's even more demanding is the MCQs are mixed up. So you have to decide whether it's a property question or if it's a litigation question that's happening to just the context is property, or whether it's a conduct question in the context of business, or whether it's a business question. So you really got to have secure knowledge of all 13 practice areas and be able to retrieve that information quickly and easily, because you have on average 1 minute 40 seconds per question. So you're having to keep up a pace. You need to be good at answering MCQs, and that's practice. It's not perhaps what you've been used to in undergrad, where you have MCQs where you can spot 2 are totally wrong, and then you narrow it down to 2, and then it's 50% chance you'll get it right. So it won't be like that at all. SQE1, it's a computer-based exam, and it can be taken globally at the Pearson VUE test centres. And I think a lot of you will have been already at those test centres if you've sat your driving theory, because it's the same setup. And there are 2 assessment points during the year. And for me, I think that's your starting point. Think about which exam you're targeting, and then look for a course that takes you right up to the point of the exam. What you don't want to do is study, and then have a 6-month break. Because it's a little bit, I suppose, like training for a marathon. You have to stay fit. You certainly don't want to take your foot off the pedal. And with MCQs, you do need to build up stamina, and you need to be brain fit to do it, as well as have all the knowledge. And exam fees are there. Now, just one word of caution. The SQE1 assessment exam fees are very independent of any fees you'll pay towards a provider. So even though, for instance, you study with us and you sit an exam, and it's credit bearing, and you can put it towards another award, that's not the same as sitting SQE1. So SQE1, separate exam fees, separate booking system, and I'm told, and we know from our recent experience, it's very, very hard. You have to be very tenacious to book on, because the places are quite tight, more so for SQE2 than SQE1. I've been told it's easier to get tickets at Glastonbury than book on. So really plan it, think it through, and know which exam you're targeting. The exams, lastly, 360 multiple choice questions. They're divided up into 4 separate exams with 90 MCQs, and you have a break and then another 90 MCQs. So it totals 10 hours, and it's split into 4 sessions over 2 days, and you have a small break between 2 sessions in any one day. Right, we'll move on to SQE2. Now, SQE2, you cannot attempt this assessment until you've passed SQE1. 50% of SQE2 assessment is based on knowledge that you acquire in SQE1. So you bring over that knowledge, and then the other 50% is the legal skills. So think of it this way: the legal skills need to be assessed in a legal context, and that legal context is the knowledge you've acquired in SQE1. Not all of it, but they pull out the main practice areas, which are business, as you'd expect, which is far-ranging, dispute resolution, which is litigation, property, criminal, which again is litigation, and wills. So those are the main areas that you're assessed in. Of course, the spin-offs, because litigation could be about a contract, for instance. You need to have a working knowledge of contracts. And this assessment is the 16 what we call stations, and 12 are written. So again, it's a bit the Pearson VUE Centre, where you're just sitting in front of a computer. And then there's 4 oral stations, and that's for advocacy and for interviewing a client. You have to pass, the marks are put together collectively, and you have to pass SQE2 as a whole. So potentially you could actually be very weak in advocacy, but be strong in all the other subjects and other skills, and they would pull you through. So down the right-hand side, you can see the legal skills on the slide. So we've got advocacy, case and matter analysis, client interviewing, and where you interview an actor, and you have to quickly give them, it's all about asking the right questions to get the right answers, to then be able to give your advice, or knowing when to stop, that actually you don't have the knowledge, and tell them that you'll go away and check. And it's about knowing your parameters as a solicitor as well. And then you have to write up an attendance note after. There's legal drafting, so just drafting a legal document, legal research, which is very basic because they don't give you open access to the internet. So actually it's quite sanitized research. And then lastly, legal writing. And increasingly that's quite a tricky one because nowadays we don't write very much, and when we do, it's pretty much shorthand. And of course, if you're writing a letter of advice, it has to be very measured. It has to, there's a huge difference between saying will and I may do something, and world of difference if you're giving legal advice. So it's just being able to write properly and appropriately, and that's just practice. Right, let's move on to the next slide. And I'm just going to have a quick look in the chat, just in case there's anything that I can pick up while I'm talking. Yeah, yes, okay, so qualifying work experience has come up, hasn't it? And yeah, people have been asking about the costs. Fine, good, okay, I think that's all clearly covered. So qualifying work experience, this is where the real flexible bit is and where it gets interesting. So it has to be practical legal experience where you're being exposed to the competencies that the SRA set out. Have a look on their website if you're wanting to get more details. What you don't have to do is cover all the competencies. You just have to be exposed to some during your work in a legal environment. It can be done anywhere in the world, but there are limitations on that. And the limitations are that somebody has to, who's qualified, has to sign off the work you've done and say that you have actually done this work, you've been exposed to it. So that's the practical hiccup. Although it's easy to say you can do it anywhere in the world, the reality is there's probably not someone to sign it off. It has to be for over 24 months, so 2 years. It can be in up to 4 different organizations. So, for instance, you could work at, do voluntary work or pro bono clinic at university. That's possible, but remember, you can't do lots of it. You can only do it in up to 4 different organizations. So you do need to plan that one out. There's no minimum or maximum length for those placements in up to 4 different organizations. And you can bank previous qualifying work experience. So you may already been exposed to that work experience and the competencies and be able to bring it in. But again, the practicalities of getting someone to sign it off often prevents people bringing in work that they maybe did 5, 6, 10 years ago. But there's no time limit. It's more just the practical. Can someone sign it? Have you recorded it? Can someone sign it off? So that's a quick trot through qualifying work experience. We have 3 different guides on our website. So have a look there if you want to see it all broken down and explain, including how to record it in a way that makes it easy for you. Right, so if we move on to the next slide, and we'll give you a little sample of what you could be up against. So SQE1 is all about MCQs. So have a read of this. I'll stay silent for a minute. And then I want you to select what you think is the right answer. Okay, so there's 5 answers there. Choose one, and then we'll move over. Jodie will take us over to Slido, and you can enter your answer. Now, while you're selecting this, just have to think that in practice, you'll have 90 questions like this, and you're averaging 1 minute 40 seconds to choose the right answer and move on. Some of the scenarios will be as long, if not longer, than the one we've given you. So I'm guessing, Julie, are the answers still coming in on Slido? Ah. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. That's very interesting. And the correct answer is C. And nobody got it right, I think. If I'm right, yeah, C. So the shareholder will have to pay £150. The reason for that, and I'll just talk you very quickly through the question. If a shareholder buys £1,001 shares, but they only paid £850, they owe the company £150. So they've acquired shares at a discount, or they haven't paid for them all. So when it goes into liquidation, the first thing that the liquidator does is call on the share capital, and that's sitting as a debt. So they will ask the shareholder to repay £150, because that's the balance they owe the company. All right, so there you are. That's something you've learned. If nothing else from this webinar, is a little bit of company law there. Good, lovely, thank you. So we'll move on to the next slide, which is slide 14, I think. Julie, yeah, lovely. So checklist. So once you've done all your studies and you've stuffed all this knowledge into, all this SQE1 functioning legal knowledge into, how do you go about revising? You need to be able to retrieve that information quickly, and therefore I think these exams are way beyond cramming things in at the end. You need to keep up a pace throughout, so that when you come to revise, you're just topping up. It just has to be revision. It's not going back and tackling areas you haven't looked at all. Practice MCQs. We find students have an insatiable appetite for MCQs. They can't get enough of them. And what it does, using MCQs to revise allows you to spot your weak areas. The way we've structured our MCQs, we give feedback, so we can send you, we'll tell you the bit of the manual you probably should read again if you're a bit shaky on it. Other thing is, often students have the knowledge, but they've been too quick to jump at the most appealing answer, rather than think about, sit and think about all the options and digest them properly. Often one looks more attractive. It's what I call the shiny wrapper, but actually it's not the right answer. So practice MCQs. Don't forget that the legal knowledge when preparing for SQE2. So again, and this picks up in some of the questions you've posted before coming into the webinar, you do need a really good, thorough knowledge of SQE1, because you take that knowledge through into SQE2. So you need a very secure knowledge. It's not an exam you just cram for and then dump the knowledge. You need a working knowledge to bring it forward into SQE2, but also you need it to take it into practice going forwards, because it's all very relevant and practical. So tailor your revision. I think that everybody revises differently, and it often depends on the way you learn and absorb information, type of learner you are. Most of you ought to have a feel for that now. And make the most of the college's learning materials, or whichever provider you're with. There are so many MCQs, so really absorb those and work with them. And I think a lot of you I know are working or will be working, so the time won't find you to revise and study. You need to find it. So you need to be very strict, not just with yourself, but with the people around you, whether it's employers or family and all your other commitments, and block out time to study. You have to have a secure knowledge, and a secure knowledge is all about preparation. Most of you, if you've got to this stage, you're able to do it. It's just giving yourself the right conditions to absorb everything. So next slide. Oh, now I've covered some of this already in giving you ideas of how to prepare. So get organised from the beginning and just think about when you work best. Some of our students will do the learning in the morning, take it with them throughout the day if they're working, and then test it in the evening with MCQs and self-test activities, and then go back if they're, so you can bite it, take it in sort of bite-sized chunks and give the knowledge time to embed, because you do need to have a working knowledge. It's not just regurgitating facts. Plan the course around your other commitments. That goes without saying. And ask questions. Make the most of the experts around you and the supervisors and tutors. Plan your finances and stay positive. And I know I shouldn't say this, but you don't need to get 100% in an exam. You just need enough to pass. So keep positive, always focus not just on what you haven't learned, but focus on what you have learned, because that gives you the right mindset to tackle what's quite a challenging set of exams. Right, I think I've probably talked enough. I think it's over to you, Jolie.
Thank you very much, Jane. It's really, really insightful to learn a little bit more about the SQE, and also thank you so much for the tips about revision and also preparing for the SQE. So moving on, we will be having a session with Mary, our student, our current LLM student. So it's always good to hear from students how they learn and how they actually study with the college. So Mary is a current LLM student with us, and also she's a trainee solicitor at Medical Solicitors, and she has passed the SQE1 assessment with the college, and she's also waiting for her SQE2 exam results. So I hope you'll hear some good news very soon, Mary, and thank you so much for joining us today as well. So do you mind sharing, so to start with, do you mind sharing with us a little bit more about your experience studying with the college, if that's okay with you?
Yeah, of course. And thank you for having me as well. So I started the LLM course with the College of Legal Practice in February last year. It seems like a really long time ago now. But at that time when I started, I was 6 months pregnant and working full time. And so the first module was what is the SQE1 preparation course. So solicitors legal knowledge. And I think it was a 20-week course. So I was doing the part-time course. So some of it might not match up with what you end up doing if you do enroll with the college, if you end up on a different length of course. But I was on a 20-week course. And it was definitely hard work. There was lots and lots of reading. So when you enroll, you get delivered 3 massive folders of reading paperwork that you need to read through. So it can be quite daunting that first week when you get that through and realise just how much work you do have to get done. But it's broken down really nicely over the weeks. So you're told exactly which chapters, which sections of each chapter that you need to be reading, and then you get the relevant work with it as well. So the MCQ questions, the drag and drop exercises, which are just sort of consolidation activities to help you remember everything. And there's also flashcards, digital flashcards that you can test your knowledge with as well. And it's all broken down week by week in the calendar as to what you need to be doing, when you need to be doing it. So it is, although it's a lot of work, the way that the college sort of structure it is really good. And then I sat the SQE1 exams in July and received my results in October that I had passed both FLK1 and FLK2. So SQE1 passed. And then I had another module which is not relevant for this because it's SQE specific, but as part of the LLM, I'd have other modules as well. And I did a personal injury module, which I think there's information on the website about if you're interested in that. But otherwise, then I skipped over to the SQE2 preparation course. I did things a little bit differently. So I started the SQE2 prep course in November last year. However, because my son has been quite ill in hospital, I contacted the college about having a leave of absence. And so I stopped studying for SQE2 in early this year and then picked it back up again in May. So they were really good about it, obviously, because there was a genuine reason and he'd been in hospital. I'd fallen quite far behind. So I was able to do that and pick back up my studies at a later date. And then I sat my exams in July this year. So a year after sitting the SQE1 exams, and I'm waiting for my results now.
Thank you so much, Mary. Sounds like a very exciting journey, and it's such a journey to see like how our materials or approach really works for you to help you prepare for the SQE1 and also SQE2 exams. So we have actually collected some questions from our attendees before they joined the webinar. So it will be really useful if you can give us some insights to that question. So I'm just going to pick some questions. So in terms of the SQE1 or SQE2, which exam do you think is more difficult? Do you find it more difficult to prepare, for example, for the SQE2, or do you think it is more or less the same?
I think if you'd have asked me just after sitting the SQE1, I would have chosen that. But because you're asking me and I've just sat SQE2, I'm probably going to say SQE2 was definitely very difficult. I think it's very easy to lose sight when you're in that zone and you're prepping for SQE1. It's very easy to lose sight of actually you've then got to carry this on and you've got SQE2 as well. And I think SQE1 is across all the different practice areas, and it's all MCQs. So I think the format remains the same throughout, whereas I think in SQE2 you have to swap and change a lot between you're writing a letter to a client and then you're the defendant and you're drafting a defense, and it's all, I feel like, swapping and changing between the different contexts and who you are and who you're advising and the area of law and exactly what task you're doing is quite challenging. So I'm going to say SQE2, but SQE1 is also very difficult. They're probably very similar, really.
Yeah, but that's interesting to hear, because like based on my experience, I feel like quite a lot of students or a lot of candidates, they find it more challenging to prepare for the SQE2 assessment. Mainly is just because it's like the skills that they will get tested on, and it's just a little bit of uncertainty that they are facing. But it's really good to hear from you because you've actually prepared and taken the test already, so that's really good. And what kind of tips you will be giving anyone who would like to take or start preparing for the SQE, or how would you manage full-time working, or even if they're just working part-time, how do you manage working while you are actually studying and preparing for the exams?
That's a very good question. And I think a lot of people have that difficulty because obviously you want to be getting your qualifying work experience or just earning an income alongside studying as well. There's not many, I don't think there's many really that have the luxury of just, taking that time out and focusing on it 100%. So I have worked full time alongside studying, and I've also been pregnant and then had a newborn baby as well. So I've had lots of different circumstances. And so hopefully I can give some tips. The first thing I would say is being very strict with yourself and with other people around you. So for example, if you leave work at a certain time, and that's because you then go home and study, I think you just need to be strict on yourself and make sure you are actually packing up your stuff and leaving at that time and going and doing what you've said you're going to do. And I think if you're not honouring your own time that you've set aside for it and other people see that, then they sort of think maybe you're around more, maybe you've got more flexibility, maybe it's not as difficult as you're saying it is, and maybe you've not got that much work to do when really you have. So I think you just have to be strict on everyone. That includes husbands and wives and friends, and just make sure that they're all aware of the times that you're unavailable and make sure that you stick by that as well. The second thing I would say is you can use every pocket of time that you've got. So if you're extremely busy, like I have been, if you've got 15 minutes, you can get your phone out and you can do 10 multiple choice questions and just get them done, and then see where you land and what you've managed to remember and what you haven't. So even the smallest pockets of times, I know obviously that's not maybe the most productive use, in terms of you'd still need some time to sit down and actually go through the material and learn it. But if you have 15 minutes, you can do 10 multiple choice questions. So if you're just you know, if you're sat waiting for a bus, or if you're, you know, there's something that you're just sat and you're waiting for something. If you're waiting in a doctor's waiting room, then you can be doing those things and using every little pocket of time that you've got. And just set a realistic schedule as well. So make sure you're really looking at the time that you've got. If you set yourself a to-do list and you're saying you're going to get this done, this done, this done, this done, and it's far too much, you know, it's unachievable, then when you don't achieve it, you're going to feel really demotivated, and you're not going to want to look at it again, because it's going to remind you that in your head you failed because you set yourself a target and you've not met it. So you just have to be really realistic with what you can actually achieve, and then you will end up being able to do more. And if you just set yourself, you know, if you're struggling with motivation, set yourself a little bit of time. Say, I'm going to go on and I'm going to do 10 multiple choice questions for 15 minutes, and that's all you have to do. But once you get started doing it, sometimes then you might feel a bit more motivated and you can carry on with it. So just make sure you do something. And obviously you have good days and you have bad days, so just not to beat yourself up about it.
That's really good. Thank you so much, Mary. I really like the idea where you said, oh, you need to make like people around you aware this is something that you need to achieve, that you're trying to work on. And it's really important to set expectations with your family, with your colleague, with your work, so that they're aware this is something that you are preparing. And I'm sure they will be very, very supportive and give you the kind of support or the space and time that you need to prepare for the exam. So that's really good. And I also really like the idea of like utilizing all of your free time. Like if I have 10 minutes, I can definitely, like, for example, practice on some MCQs questions so that you can learn a little bit more. And also really good on like setting realistic goals and also objectives, so that it's more achievable and more motivating when you actually, okay, you reach that short-term goal. Okay, what's next? What's more I need to achieve? So that's really, really helpful. So thank you so much, Mary. And then another interesting question asked by another person is that what kind of course, there will be quite a lot of information that you need to like digest and memorize. What kind of advice can you give on any potential candidates on actually remembering or digesting a large volume of information for both exams?
So it's just practice, really. So I think for SQE1, I didn't, until it came to revising, I didn't really make any notes along the way. I just went back over the materials and practiced with the multiple choice questions. So it's important that when you're following along the calendar, so each week you have certain things that you're learning and you're studying, and that's new information that you're taking on, that you look back at the previous weeks and make time. So like I said, when you do have those 15 minutes and you can do some practice questions, don't just stick to that week that you're studying at the moment. Make sure that you're going back to week 1 and week 2 and week 3 and going back over that information that you learnt then, so that it's still keeping fresh in your mind, because it definitely is very easy to forget things. And I think I didn't do that at first. And then when I had sort of my first formative assessment, which is sort of a practice assessment under timed conditions, and you can see really what you're remembering and what you're not, it was definitely those earlier weeks that I was forgetting. And it's because I hadn't been going back and just going over that material again and making sure it's sticking in my mind. And I think you just have to try really and see what works for you, because it might be that MCQs work well for you, and practicing those, obviously you need to practice them because that's the way you're going to be examined. But if recalling the information better, you do better with the flashcards or the drag and drop exercises, or if you prefer to just reread the information or make your own notes, whatever works for you. Then obviously it's a case of just figuring that out. And so if you do have the time at the beginning of the course to get ahead a little bit, that can sometimes help with that. It just takes a bit of time really to settle in and figure out what works for you and what doesn't. So that would help.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really good advice. The more you practice, the more you know about what you know and what you don't know. So it's really good to just keep on practicing so that you are like comfortable in all the areas. So that's really good. And how about the SQE2 exam, how do you prepare for that assessment? Anything that you do differently from, because like it's so different from the SQE1, like do you do something differently when you are preparing for the exam for the SQE2?
So SQE2 is definitely a very, very different exam to SQE1. Of course, there's lots of different tasks, and then
Yes.
within those tasks, you've got lots of different subject areas that you could be tested on. So there's really a lot to cover. Again, it's going to come down to practice in terms of the revision. You do need to, and the college provide actually tons of practices that you can do. I don't even think by the end I managed to get all of the revision ones finished before the actual exam, because there was just so many practices that you could do, which is really helpful. And I think just once you've cracked sort of the format for like research, so that's always going to be in the same format. Writing, once you've got the basics down, it's just keeping that embedded in your mind. So by practicing and getting that done, and then comes the legal content, and you've got to be making sure that you're giving the correct advice and that you're getting to the correct conclusion. I think a particularly difficult one in terms of revision would be the drafting, and that's because there are a number of different documents that you could be asked to draft. And so what I wish I had done earlier, but ended up doing in the end, is just saving a precedent of all of the different types of document that you could end up with. And obviously it's not an exhaustive list. SRA could put something else in there that you've not had the chance to view, and we can't guess what they could be. But it's nice to sort of have an idea of the different documents, how they're formatted, what you need to remember for each one. And I just kept it in a folder so that I could look and just check it, and I could, look at that on my way into the exam as well, and make sure I was familiar with all of the different documents. But again, it just really comes down to practice, and the College of Legal Practice do have lots and lots of practice exercises that you can do, and so there's plenty to do.
That's great. It's really good to hear that you've been utilizing all the resources or the material from the college to help you prepare for the course, and it works. And it's also really interesting to hear what you do additionally to find something that works for you as well. So that's really good. So do you have any advice or anything that you can share with any candidates who are trying to to do the exam, like on the day? Is there anything that they need to be aware of, anything that they need to do on the exam date that you think will really help them in succeed in the SQE exam?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure really. I think just whatever is going to help you. I think it's a very personal question in terms of the nerves and how you deal with that. Some people prefer to talk to people, and that helps them through any stress that they've got going in. And some people prefer to just keep to themselves and keep quiet. And I think it's a case of just whatever works for you, really. For me in particular, I think I didn't want to be going over my notes, particularly when you're waiting for the oral exams. You're sort of sat in groups, and you can have access to your notes, and you can get your notes out and be looking through them. And I think when I looked around the room, nobody was doing that, and nobody, I think, felt the need. And I think it might have probably added to the stress if we all did get our notes out and started cramming, and then you start thinking about, oh, what if I've forgotten this, or I don't remember that, and you start getting yourself into that panic already before you've got in the room. So I think it's just really whatever you think is going to keep you calm, relaxed, and just focused, ready before you go into the room, is probably just what's going to be best for you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's very important to make sure that you are very calm, you are not stressed before the exam. So that's really good sharing. Thank you very much, Mary. And I guess one last question from quite a lot of students. Of course, just now Jane was talking a little bit more about the qualifying work experience, but based on your own experience, how do you allocate those qualifying work experience? Do you do it before the SQE exam, or are you gaining some work experience alongside your preparation of the SQE?
Yeah, so I've worked as a paralegal for about 4 years before I started my my trainee role this year. So I already had a good chunk of my 2 years with my previous firm, and so I contacted them and asked online. You just have to put in the SRA number of the solicitor who's going to be approving your qualifying work experience, and then it gets sent over to them to approve. In my experience, it's been very nice and smooth. I think that my previous manager just sort of ticked it off, and it came straight back straight away with no problems, and it's been approved. I think a lot of people have had difficulties really in terms of whether their manager understands what they're signing off. And I think, like Jane said, you have to be exposed to some of the competencies, but you don't have to meet them all. That's what the exams are for. They test you on whether you're competent or not. And so I think what I would advise is, if you're emailing your manager, is to maybe direct them to the SRA and some of the advice that they have on approving qualifying work experience and what it actually involves and what they are having to approve, just to make it clear that they don't have to say that you're competent in absolutely every area that's going to be tested in the exams. They just have to show that you have had the opportunity to gain some qualifying work experience. But yeah, mine's been quite straightforward, just all with the one provider. And I think you can get that ticked off at any point in the stage. So you don't have to wait until you've passed the SQE exams before you can get that logged on. You can do it before you've even sat SQE1. So you just have to open an account with the SRA and get that ticked off.
Cool. Thank you very much, Mary. And yes, of course, it's quite flexible in terms of how and when you wanted to do to gain your qualifying work experience. But it's really good to hear what you have been doing as well. So thank you very much. And also, if anyone has any other like questions, we can always get back to you. And I can see that in the chat. I'll just quickly check the chat. Okay, someone was asking about the course, but we'll cover that later. But again, thank you so much, Mary, for joining us today. It's really, really insightful to hear like how your journey has been and how you actually prepare for the SQE exam. So wish you all the best with the result for the SQE2 and also finishing your qualifying work experience. And yeah, once again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on, I'm just going to go to the next slide. So, of course, Jane and also Mary has shared a lot of brilliant tips and also and advices on how to prepare for the SQE. The College of Legal Practice actually created a Secrets to SQE Success Guide, and you can see the QR code on the screen. You can scan it. It is free, so feel free to download the guide if you would like to learn more about the tips in succeeding in the SQE. One thing that is worth mentioning is that this guide includes information and tips that comes from our students who have completed it and also comes from our supervisors who have taught the course. So they are actually providing their first-hand experience and advices on succeeding in the SQE. So really, really useful. So feel free to download this. And for those, if you are still at a very early stage of deciding whether the solicitor profession is right for you, feel free to download the other guide that we have created and launched early last week. This is a guide called Becoming a Solicitor, and is it right for you? So this guide basically brings together a lot of advices and tips, and it also from experienced and also newly qualified solicitors, alongside with some graduate recruitment professionals. So if you would like to really see if becoming a solicitor is something suitable for you, feel free to read our guide. So yeah, of course, from what Jane and also Mary has mentioned earlier, I just wanted to highlight again the approach that we do in helping you to pass the SQE and also in supporting your SQE journey. So first and foremost, just wanted to highlight our flexible learning. So you can basically arrange your study that fits around your timetable and also fits your schedule. So we do have a weekly timetable that you can get before you start your course, and it will give you a very clear picture of what your week will look like. And as mentioned by also Mary and also Jane, there will be multiple group session with our supervisors and also one-to-one individual supervision session to really support you and ensure that you progress successfully through the course. And also in terms of the practice assessment, tons of practice opportunities for you here to undertake the assessment or activities that will replicate the SQE assessment. And then you will also have the opportunity to receive feedback from our supervisor. One thing that's worth mentioning is our unique SQE Ready review. So towards the end, you will get an individual SQE Ready review from our supervisor, and we will be giving you some advice on your likelihood of passing the SQE assessment based on your performance. So it will be really, really helpful for you to determine or to decide if you are actually ready for the SQE assessment or if you need to prepare more. And lastly, I just wanted to also highlight that we have received very positive feedback from our students so far about our approach and resources that we provide in helping them to prepare and pass their SQE. And it's really, really rewarding as a team and for the college to see that our students are highly satisfied about our courses, and that is really helpful for them to pass the SQE as well. So on the screen here, you can see the courses that we offer. You can see that we have SQE1 prep course, SQE2 prep course, and we also have LLM and also our law conversion course. So for the all of our courses, there will be full-time and part-time options depending on your weekly time commitment. So for example, our 13-week SQE prep course, that's a full-time course. It will require around 25 to 30 hours per week. And if you're choosing 20 weeks, then it will be around 15 to 20 hours. And for the 40 weeks is a more extended course, and you will be expected to contribute around 8 hours per week in studying for the course. And for the LLM, in legal practice, this program is a master's degree and it includes the SQE1 and also SQE2 preparation course. In addition to that, you will be choosing 3 electives. They are the transactional and business skills modules. They are practical skills modules that will prepare you for work as a newly qualified solicitor. And then lastly, there will be a capstone project. So after you complete, basically when you do the LLM in legal practice with us, you will also prepare yourself for the SQE assessment as well. And then after you finish it, you will gain a master's degree. And for our graduate foundation in law, it is a law conversion course if you come from a non-law background. So lastly, of course, if anyone has any further questions, feel free to ask. I'm going to check the checkbox in a second, but just wanted to say if, for example, after this webinar, you would like to have a further discussion, in-depth discussion with the team, feel free to book for a one-to-one Calendly appointment with the team, and we can have a further discussion in regards to your experience, your journey, and then we can advise more. And also, if you haven't already done so, feel free to join our LinkedIn SQE info groups as well, so that we can keep you updated on any interesting update about the SQE and also any relevant career advices and events that are relevant to you.